In the cold silence of a dawn, the hospital's glass doors open to another day. In front of them, a German shepherd sits, motionless, without a leash, with no owner in sight. Patients and nurses whisper, but the animal doesn't move, ignoring food and warding off anyone who tries to remove it. The security guards exchange glances, hesitating before the low growl that keeps everyone at a distance. Footsteps echo down the corridor. The glass reflects the motionless gaze, like an invisible sentinel. Days follow. The dog seems attached to those doors by an invisible magnet. Then a child approaches, and the animal gives in to the touch, breaking the cycle of coldness. Hours later, the medical record reveals a patient with no family, just an inexplicable bond. And at that instant, the entire hospital stops before a truth no one was prepared to face. Love stories with animals? Subscribe now and don't miss any. Thanks for joining us. Now back to our story. From the very first morning when the glass doors of St. Mary's Medical Center slid open to welcome another quiet dawn, the staff noticed the unsettling and intriguing presence of a German shepherd sitting motionless before the main entrance. There was no collar, no owner in sight, just the animal standing erect, eyes fixed forward, breathing measured, and a sentinel posture that conveyed both firmness and contained desperation. Nurses murmured among themselves, patients whispered as they passed, and even the security guards, accustomed to maintaining order in adverse situations, seemed to hesitate before approaching him. Each attempt to get near resulted in a low growl, not of threat, but of warning, as if the animal was protecting something humans had yet to comprehend. The hospital's routine, already laden with metallic sounds and hurried footsteps, gained an unexpected element. The tick-tock of clocks seemed more audible when one's gaze crossed with the dog's, as if time itself stood suspended before his obstinacy. Doctors rotated between surgeries and consultations, but whenever they passed through the door, their eyes were drawn to the unusual scene. Some questioned whether there might be a sanitary risk in keeping him there. Others suggested the city pound should be called to collect him. But curiously, no one had the courage to impose a definitive order. There was something in the firmness of that gaze that made them retreat. Margaret Walsh, head nurse of the emergency department, had been working at St. Mary's for 23 years. She had seen everything from minor cuts to major trauma cases, but nothing quite like this. The dog's unwavering presence gnawed at her professional composure. "Someone needs to do something about this situation," she told Dr. James Patterson during their morning rounds, her voice carrying more uncertainty than authority. Dr. Patterson, a seasoned physician with silver hair and kind eyes, simply shook his head. "I tried approaching him yesterday evening. The look in his eyes, Margaret, I've never seen anything like it. It's as if he knows something we don't." As days passed, the strangeness transformed into discomfort. The animal refused food offered by staff members, drinking only water that pooled from rain on the smooth pavement, and even when exhausted, never abandoned his post. When someone tried to lead him away, just a few meters of distance would cause him to run back, as if an invisible magnet kept him bound to those doors. The German shepherd's obstinacy awakened curiosity, and inevitably, rumors began to spread. Who could be inside? What could justify such fierce loyalty? Sarah Chen, a housekeeper who cared for elderly patients on the third floor, commented that she had seen this dog accompanying an elderly gentleman during past appointments. The memory brought unease. Could he be the patient admitted to the ICU, isolated and without visitors? This possibility raised new suspicions, and with them, the tension in the air increased. With each shift change, more people discreetly peered through the glass, trying to find connections between the dog and some occupied bed. The heavy silence of the waiting room seemed to mix with the rustling of leaves in the hospital garden, as if even nature was suspended awaiting a revelation. Thomas Blackwood, a corporate executive admitted for emergency treatment following severe chest pains, locked eyes with the dog as he was being transferred in a wheelchair through the main entrance. He felt a shiver, not from fear, but from the contrast between the fragility of the man inside the hospital and the silent strength waiting outside. Some commented that the shepherd's presence was an omen, others believed it to be a pure gesture of loyalty. What was certain was that little by little, even the most skeptical began to slow their pace when crossing the corridor leading to the exit, as if they were before something sacred. Jennifer Martinez, a young nurse fresh out of nursing school, found herself drawn to the mystery more than most. During her lunch breaks, she would sit near the window overlooking the entrance, watching the dog with a mixture of fascination and sadness. "Why doesn't anyone know who he belongs to?" she asked repeatedly. Someone must recognize him. But the truth was, while the dog's presence seemed vaguely familiar to several staff members, no one could quite place where they had seen him before. When the hospital administration considered calling authorities to remove the animal by force, the first twist emerged. An older nurse named Dorothy Williams revealed she had seen the dog sitting beside a patient's bed during previous admissions, always motionless, always vigilant, as if guarding a secret that human eyes could not reach. This memory changed the course of discussions, and instead of expelling him, they decided to observe. The dog became part of the routine. He was there in the morning at dusk, and also during the cold nights when wind made the metal doors creak. Detective Robert Hayes, off duty and visiting his nephew who had broken his leg in a skateboarding accident, took interest in the situation. "This isn't normal animal behavior," he told the security chief, Michael Torres. "Dogs don't typically maintain this kind of vigil unless there's a powerful bond involved. Have you checked recent admissions for elderly men living alone?" Michael nodded slowly. "We've tried, but privacy laws prevent us from sharing patient information. All we know is there's someone up in ICU who matches that description, but we can't confirm anything." The maintenance staff began leaving small bowls of water near the entrance, which the dog would occasionally approach, but never stray far from his chosen spot. Carlos Rodriguez, the night janitor, swore he heard the dog whimpering softly during the early morning hours, a sound so heartbreaking it made him pause in his work. "It's like he's crying," Carlos told his wife over breakfast. "That dog is waiting for someone, and whatever's happening inside those walls, it's tearing him apart." On the fourth day, something broke the cycle of silence. A young girl named Emma Thompson, with bandages on her arms from a bicycle accident, timidly approached the animal. To everyone's surprise, he didn't growl or move away. He allowed the gentle touch, accepted the caress, and lay down for moments. It was the first time he demonstrated fragility, the first crack in the wall of silence. That scene moved those present and brought a new rumor. Perhaps the dog wasn't just guarding one person, but a bond even deeper that connected them all within those walls. Dr. Elizabeth Monroe, a psychiatrist who happened to witness the interaction between Emma and the dog, found herself profoundly affected. "There's something almost therapeutic about his presence," she mentioned to colleagues during their afternoon meeting. "Several patients have commented on feeling strangely comforted knowing he's out there waiting. It's as if his loyalty reminds us of something essential we've forgotten in our busy lives." Rebecca Foster, the hospital's social worker, decided to dig deeper into the mystery. She began reviewing admission records from the past year, looking for patterns, for any elderly patient who might have been accompanied by a service animal or emotional support dog. The German Shepherd didn't wear any official vest or identification, but the bond was clearly profound. "I'm going to find out who that dog is waiting for," she told herself, determination settling in her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. Shortly after, during a shift change in the ICU, the truth began to emerge. An elderly patient, isolated and without family, was admitted in critical condition. The medical records revealed a detail that chilled even the most experienced professionals. The only record of consistent connection was the presence of the German Shepherd who had accompanied him to all previous appointments. There were no children, no spouse, no heirs, just the animal, silent witness to his entire life. The dog, in his vigil, wasn't awaiting his own rescue. but news of the only human being to whom he had devoted his entire existence. Hospital chaplain Father Michael O'Connor found himself drawn to the situation in ways that surprised him. He had counseled countless families through difficult times, but this silent vigil spoke to something deeper about faithfulness and love. "That dog out there," he said during a staff meeting, "is teaching us something profound about commitment. How many of us would wait with such dedication for someone we love?" This revelation, however, did not end the mystery, only deepened it. The executive, who had previously shown indifference, began to reflect on his own relationships, comparing the dog's loyalty to the fragility of his social bonds. Thomas Blackwood found himself unable to focus on work. Emails, his mind constantly returning to the image of that steadfast guardian. Nurses cried discreetly in the cafeteria, touched by the silent devotion. The administration suspended any removal orders, transforming the dog into a sort of honorary guardian of the hospital. Still, an unsettling feeling hung over everyone. How had that animal known, with such precision, the moment when his owner had been admitted? Linda Peterson, who worked in medical records, discovered something that made her blood run cold. She approached Dr. Patterson with trembling hands, holding a printout. "Doctor, you need to see this." According to our entry logs, the dog appeared at the hospital entrance at 6:47 a.m. on Monday morning. But the ambulance bringing the patient, a Mr. Henry Morrison from Oak Street, didn't arrive until 10:23 a.m. Dr. Patterson's face paled as he processed this information. "That's impossible. How could the dog have known?" The news spread through the hospital like wildfire. Staff members who had been skeptical now found themselves unnerved by this inexplicable detail. Maria Santos, a laboratory technician, crossed herself when she heard. "My grandmother used to say animals can sense things we can't," she whispered to her co-worker. Maybe this dog knew something terrible was about to happen. As tension mounted, this second revelation took hold. Doctors who reviewed the admission schedules realized the dog had arrived at the hospital doors hours before the ambulance brought the elderly gentleman. This inexplicable coincidence made many begin to view his presence as a living omen, a manifestation that defied logic. What had been merely loyalty became an almost supernatural mystery, though no one dared name it as such aloud. The entire hospital seemed to breathe in unison with the animal, awaiting an outcome that could be either hopeful or heartbreaking. Night shift workers reported that the dog's behavior changed during the darkest hours. While he maintained his vigil, there were moments when he would stand, face the ICU windows on the third floor, and release a soft, mournful sound that barely qualified as a howl, more like a prayer in a language only he understood. Nurse Amanda Brooks, working the graveyard shift, found herself unable to sleep during her days off. The image of the German Shepherd haunted her thoughts. She had been present when Henry Morrison was brought in by ambulance that Monday morning, his frail body struggling for each breath, his weathered hands clutching at nothing as paramedics rushed him through those same glass doors where his faithful companion now waited. "Did you see a dog outside?" Amanda had asked the paramedics. They had looked at her strangely, shaking their heads. The ambulance had come from Morrison's modest house on Oak Street, and there had been no dog in sight. Rebecca Foster, the social worker, had finally obtained permission to review Henry Morrison's complete file. What she discovered painted a picture of profound loneliness mixed with unexpected richness. Morrison had been a World War II veteran, a widower for 15 years, whose wife Eleanor had passed from complications of pneumonia. They had never had children. His neighbors described him as a quiet man who kept to himself, always seen with his German Shepherd, a dog he had named Duke after his commanding officer in the war. "They were inseparable," said Mrs. Gladys Henderson, Morrison's next-door neighbor for 30 years, when Rebecca called her. "After Eleanor died, that dog became Henry's whole world. He talked to Duke like he was a person. Sometimes I'd hear him through the walls, telling Duke about his day, about Eleanor, about the old times." The mystery of Duke's early arrival at the hospital, however, remained unexplained. Mrs. Henderson provided another piece of the puzzle that made the situation even more extraordinary. On Sunday night around midnight, I heard Duke barking frantically. It wasn't his usual bark, you understand. It was desperate, urgent. I looked out my window and saw him scratching at Henry's front door. But I didn't see Henry. I almost called the police. But the barking stopped after about 10 minutes, and I figured everything was fine. Rebecca did the math. Duke had been barking desperately almost 7 hours before the ambulance would arrive. Almost 7.5 hours before he appeared at the hospital. Dr. James Patterson requested a meeting with the ICU team to discuss Morrison's condition and the unusual circumstances surrounding his admission. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, addressing the assembled medical staff, "we have a unique situation. Our patient in ICU room 7, Henry Morrison, is stable but critical. His prognosis is uncertain. But what concerns me beyond the medical aspects is the psychological and perhaps ethical dimension of what's happening outside our doors." Dr. Catherine Liu, the ICU director, leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we should somehow inform the dog of his owner's condition?" "James, that's not exactly standard medical protocol." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room, but Patterson remained serious. "I'm suggesting that we're witnessing something extraordinary. That dog arrived here before his owner, as if he knew. He's maintained a vigil that defies rational explanation, and every staff member who's encountered him reports the same thing, an almost human intelligence in his eyes, a purposefulness that goes beyond ordinary animal behavior." Thomas Blackwood, the executive patient, had been moved from emergency care to a regular room on the second floor. His cardiac episode had been stress-related, not a heart attack, and he was scheduled for discharge in 2 days. But something had fundamentally shifted in him. He found himself requesting a room with a view of the main entrance, just so he could watch Duke's vigil. His wife, Patricia, flew in from their home in Chicago, concerned about his health, but puzzled by his fixation on the dog. "Thomas, why are you so obsessed with that animal?" Patricia asked, adjusting the flowers she had brought in a vase by his bedside. Thomas turned from the window where he had been watching Duke's unmoving form. "Because, Patricia, that dog has more loyalty, more dedication, more purpose than I've shown in 20 years of our marriage. Look at him. He's waiting for someone who might never come back to him, and he hasn't moved, hasn't given up, hasn't lost faith." Patricia's eyes softened. "But Thomas, you're here." "I'm here. We have each other, do we?" Thomas's voice cracked slightly. "When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time we talked about something other than my work or your charity events? That dog out there is teaching me something I forgot how to feel." Patricia sat down heavily in the visitor's chair, her perfectly manicured hands folded in her lap. "What are you saying?" Young nurse Jennifer Martinez had taken it upon herself to document Duke's vigil. She started a journal, noting every detail. What time he shifted positions, when he drank water, how he reacted to different people passing by. On the 5th day, she noticed something that made her heart race. Duke had begun to pace, just slightly, back and forth in front of the doors, as if sensing some change invisible to human perception. She rushed to find Dr. Patterson. "Doctor, something's different about Duke. He's agitated in a way he hasn't been before." Patterson followed her to the entrance. And indeed, Duke's behavior had changed. His ears were alert, his body tense, and every few moments he would look up at the third-floor windows, then back at the entrance, as if torn between two equally strong impulses. "Check on Morrison," Patterson ordered. Jennifer sprinted to the ICU, her heart pounding. When she burst through the doors, the monitors around Henry Morrison's bed were showing increased activity. His vital signs had improved dramatically. Dr. Liu was already there, checking the readings with amazement. "I don't understand it," she said. "His blood pressure has stabilized. His oxygen levels are improving. It's as if something triggered a healing response." Jennifer looked at the clock, 2:47 p.m. She made a note in her journal. When she returned to the entrance, Duke had stopped pacing. He sat calmly once more, but there was something different in his posture now. Something almost peaceful, as if a message had been received and understood. Father O'Connor had been spending increasing amounts of time in Morrison's room, sitting quietly by his bedside, sometimes reading scripture, sometimes just providing silent companionship. Morrison had been unconscious since admission, his body fighting an infection that had ravaged his system, complicated by his advanced age and weakened heart. But the chaplain felt something unusual in that room, a presence he couldn't quite explain. "I've attended to countless patients," he told Dr. Patterson later, "but there's something different about Morrison. It's as if he's not completely here, as if part of his consciousness is somewhere else, perhaps connected to that faithful creature waiting outside." Carlos Rodriguez, the night janitor, had developed his own ritual. Each night during his shift, he would pause in his rounds, stand near the entrance, and watch Duke for a few moments. "My father had a dog like that," he told anyone who would listen. "A bond like that doesn't happen by accident. It's built over years, over shared experiences, over unconditional love. Whatever happens with Mr. Morrison, that dog deserves respect." On the 6th day, the hospital received an unexpected visitor. A man in his 50s, wearing a military uniform, appeared at the reception desk asking about Henry Morrison. "My name is Colonel David Morrison," he said. "Henry is my uncle, my father's brother. I received a call from a neighbor saying he'd been hospitalized." The staff exchanged glances. No one had been able to locate any family members. Rebecca Foster was called down immediately. "Colonel Morrison, we've been trying to find family members," Rebecca said, relief evident in her voice. "Your uncle is in critical but stable condition in our ICU." David Morrison's face showed both concern and confusion. "I haven't seen Uncle Henry in years. We lost touch after my father passed. But I got this strange call from a Mrs. Henderson saying I needed to come immediately, that it was urgent." He paused, looking around the lobby. "She also mentioned something about a dog." Rebecca led him toward the entrance, and when David saw Duke, he stopped dead in his tracks. "My God," he whispered. "That's Duke. That's definitely Duke." He moved toward the door, and for the first time in 6 days, Duke's reaction was different. His tail moved just slightly, a tentative recognition. "You remember me, boy?" David knelt down, tears forming in his eyes. "I used to visit Uncle Henry every Christmas when I was a kid. You were just a puppy then." Duke allowed David to approach, to touch him, but he didn't move from his spot. "He won't leave," David said, understanding dawning on his face. "He's waiting for Uncle Henry." Rebecca nodded. "He's been here since before your uncle even arrived. We don't understand how, but he knew." The reunion between David and his uncle's loyal companion created a new dynamic in the hospital. Staff members who had been watching from a distance now felt emboldened to share their observations and theories. Dr. Monroe, the psychiatrist, organized an impromptu meeting in the staff lounge. "What we're witnessing," she said, "is a demonstration of interspecies communication and loyalty that defies our current understanding of animal cognition. Duke isn't just waiting. He's actively maintaining a connection with his owner that transcends physical barriers." Emma Thompson, the young girl who had been the first to successfully approach Duke, had been discharged 2 days earlier. But she returned with her mother, carrying a hand-drawn picture of Duke sitting by the hospital entrance. "I wanted to give this to the dog," she told Jennifer Martinez. "He made me feel brave when I was scared." Jennifer took the picture and, with permission, placed it in a waterproof frame near Duke's waiting spot. The dog sniffed it carefully, then returned to his vigilant posture. But something in his eyes seemed to soften as the sun began to set on the 6th day, casting long shadows across the hospital parking lot. Dr. Patterson made a decision that would change everything. Dr. James Patterson stood in the hospital administrator's office, facing Helen Crawford, a woman known for her strict adherence to hospital policies and regulations. "You want to do what?" Helen's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and concern. "James, we have protocols for a reason. Animals are not permitted beyond the lobby, especially not in the ICU." "Helen, listen to me." Patterson leaned forward, his hands pressed against her desk. "I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. I've seen countless cases where patients rally when given something to fight for. something to connect to. Henry Morrison is slipping away from us. His vitals are stable, but he's not responding to treatment the way we'd expect. That dog outside, Duke, represents his will to live. They need each other. Helen removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. The weight of 6 days of this unusual situation had worn on everyone, including her. The liability issues alone could shut us down. If that dog becomes aggressive, if he carries diseases, if something goes wrong. She trailed off, seeing the determination in Patterson's eyes. You really believe this could make a difference? I know it will, Patterson said with quiet conviction. I've watched that dog for 6 days. I've seen how staff members react to him, how patients have been affected by his presence. Young Emma Thompson told her mother she wants to be a veterinarian now because Duke showed her what real love looks like. Thomas Blackwood is reconciling with his wife after years of emotional distance. Something extraordinary is happening here, and we have an opportunity to be part of something that transcends standard medical practice. Meanwhile, Colonel David Morrison sat in the ICU waiting area, his military composure cracking as he spoke with Rebecca Foster. I should have visited more, he said, his voice thick with regret. After my father died, I threw myself into my career, told myself Uncle Henry preferred his solitude. But the truth is, I was too busy, too self-absorbed. Now he's lying in there, fighting for his life, and I don't even know if he knows I'm here. Rebecca placed a comforting hand on his arm. Your uncle has Duke. That bond has kept him going. But your presence matters too. Family matters, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Colonel Morrison, there's something you should know about the timeline of events. Duke appeared here hours before your uncle was brought in by ambulance. The neighbors say he was barking frantically the night before. It's as if he sensed what was coming. David's military training had prepared him for many things, but not for the emotional weight of this moment. My father used to tell stories about dogs in the war, he said quietly. Dogs that would wait at train stations for soldiers who never came home. Dogs that could sense danger before it happened. I always thought they were just stories meant to comfort us, to give meaning to loss. But Duke, he's living proof that some bonds transcend what we can understand. At that moment, Dr. Patterson emerged from the administrator's office with an expression that made everyone in the waiting area turn. Colonel Morrison, he said, we've made a decision. We're going to allow Duke to visit your uncle. The room erupted in a mixture of gasps and murmurs. But there are conditions. The visit will be brief, closely monitored, and Duke must remain calm. Any sign of distress or aggression, and we end it immediately. Jennifer Martinez, who had been waiting anxiously, jumped to her feet. Doctor, I'll help coordinate it. I've been documenting Duke's behavior, and I believe I can handle him. Dorothy Williams, the experienced nurse who had first recognized Duke from previous visits, stepped forward as well. I'll prepare the room, and Mr. Morrison, if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. The preparation took over an hour. The ICU was cleared of unnecessary personnel. Infection control protocols were reviewed multiple times, and a veterinary consultant was called in to assess Duke's health and temperament. Dr. Catherine Liu, though skeptical, agreed to oversee the medical aspects. This is highly irregular, she said, but I have to admit Morrison's condition has been puzzling. Standard treatments aren't producing expected results. Perhaps there's something to this connection that medical science hasn't fully explored. Thomas Blackwood, hearing about the planned reunion through the hospital grapevine, asked his wife to wheel him to a position where he could observe. Patricia, moved by her husband's transformation over the past days, agreed without hesitation. I want to see this too, she said softly. I want to understand what's changed you. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the moment finally arrived. Colonel Morrison, accompanied by Jennifer and Dorothy, approached Duke at the entrance. The dog's immediate recognition of David was evident, but his primary focus remained unwavering. Duke, David said gently, kneeling beside the German Shepherd, we're going to see Uncle Henry now. You're going to see him. At the mention of Henry's name, Duke's ears perked up, his entire body tensing with anticipation. Jennifer slowly attached a hospital-provided leash to Duke's collar, moving with careful deliberation. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "We're taking you to Henry. Come on, Duke. Come with us." For the first time in 6 days, Duke stood and willingly moved away from his post at the entrance. The hospital staff, who had gathered to witness this moment, held their collective breath as the small procession made its way through the lobby toward the elevators. Duke's behavior was exemplary, his focus entirely on the path ahead, as if he understood the gravity and privilege of this moment. As the elevator doors closed, carrying Duke, Colonel Morrison, Jennifer, and Dorothy upward, Father O'Connor found himself praying silently. Not the standard prayers of his vocation, but something more personal, more desperate. "Please," he whispered, "let this reunion bring healing. Let love be stronger than medical science. Let connection be the medicine that no prescription can provide." In the ICU, Dr. Patterson and Dr. Liu had prepared Room 7 with meticulous care. Henry Morrison lay still, his weathered face peaceful, despite the tubes and monitors surrounding him. His breathing was steady but shallow, his vital signs stable but not improving. The staff had cleaned the room thoroughly, repositioned equipment to allow for space, and prepared for any eventuality. The elevator chimed on the 3rd floor. Duke emerged with controlled urgency, his powerful frame vibrating with barely contained energy. He could sense his human nearby, the connection that had kept him vigil at the hospital entrance, now pulling him forward like an invisible thread. As they approached Room 7, Duke began to whimper, a sound so filled with longing and hope that it brought tears to Jennifer's eyes. Dr. Patterson opened the door slowly. "Remember," he said to everyone present, "we proceed carefully. Duke's reaction will tell us how to proceed, David." Morrison nodded, his hand firmly on Duke's lead, though he could feel the dog's tremendous strength and knew that if Duke truly wanted to break free, no human force could stop him. The moment Duke entered the room and saw Henry Morrison lying in the hospital bed, something extraordinary happened. The dog's entire demeanor changed from barely controlled excitement to gentle reverence. He approached the bed with careful steps, his eyes never leaving his owner's face. When he reached the bedside, Duke placed his large head gently on the edge of the mattress, releasing a soft whine that sounded almost like speech. A desperate communication in a language only he and Henry could fully understand. The monitors around Henry's bed suddenly came alive with activity. His heart rate, which had been steady but weak, began to strengthen. His breathing deepened. Most remarkably, his eyelids fluttered, something that hadn't happened since his admission. Dr. Liu watched the vital signs with amazement, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. "This is impossible," she whispered, but the evidence was right before her eyes. Duke, sensing the response, carefully placed one paw on the bed, his eyes searching Henry's face desperately. Colonel Morrison, watching this interaction, felt his military composure completely crumble. "Uncle Henry," he said, his voice breaking, "Duke is here. Your boy is here. He's been waiting for you." At that moment, Henry Morrison's eyes opened. The movement was slight at first, just a flutter of consciousness. But his gaze immediately found Duke. Recognition flared in those weathered eyes, followed by something that looked almost like surprise, then overwhelming love. His lips moved, trying to form words that his weakened body couldn't yet produce. But his hand, which had lain motionless for 6 days, slowly lifted from the bed and moved toward Duke's head. The reunion of hand and fur was electric. Duke leaned into his owner's touch, his entire body trembling with emotion. The whimpers turned to soft, gentle sounds of pure joy. Henry's fingers, though weak, managed to stroke Duke's familiar coat, that simple touch conveying more than words ever could. Tears streamed down the faces of everyone in the room as they witnessed this moment of pure, transcendent love. Dr. Patterson, his eyes moist, checked the monitors again. Every vital sign was improving, not dramatically, but steadily, as if Henry's body had finally found a reason to fight. "The power of connection," he murmured to Dr. Liu, who could only nod. her scientific skepticism shattered by the evidence before her. Father O'Connor, who had quietly entered the room to witness the reunion, felt his faith affirmed in a way that years of theological study had never achieved. "This," he said softly, "is what divine love looks like when it takes earthly form." After 10 precious minutes, Dr. Patterson gently indicated that it was time for Duke to leave, though every fiber of his being resisted making that decision. "We need to ensure Mr. Morrison doesn't become overstimulated," he explained, though the words felt hollow against the backdrop of what they had just witnessed. Jennifer approached Duke carefully, touching his shoulder. "Come on, boy," she said softly. "We'll come back. I promise we'll come back." Duke's intelligence was evident in how he responded. He gave Henry one last long look, licked his owner's hand gently, then allowed himself to be led away. But as they reached the door, Duke turned back one final time, and Henry, with tremendous effort, lifted his hand in what could only be described as a wave. The gesture was weak, but it was there, a promise, a connection maintained. As they made their way back to the entrance, the atmosphere in the hospital had completely transformed. Staff members who had witnessed the procession, who had heard about the reunion, found themselves re-evaluating their understanding of healing, of medicine, of the invisible bonds that connect living beings. The transformation in Henry Morrison following Duke's visit was nothing short of miraculous. Within hours, his vital signs had stabilized significantly. By morning, he was conscious for longer periods, able to communicate with gestures and eventually, weak words. Dr. Patterson and Dr. Liu found themselves consulting medical journals and research papers, trying to find scientific explanations for what they were witnessing. But conventional medicine offered no adequate answers. "The mind-body connection is real," Dr. Monroe explained during an emergency ethics committee meeting called to discuss the unprecedented situation. "We've known for decades that emotional state affects physical healing. But what we're witnessing with Mr. Morrison goes beyond standard psychological responses. The bond between him and Duke has literally activated his will to survive in ways our medications and treatments couldn't achieve." Colonel David Morrison had taken a leave of absence from his duties to remain at his uncle's bedside. The years of distance between them seemed to dissolve as Henry, though still weak, began to share stories of his life, of Eleanor, of the war, and most importantly, of Duke. "Found him," Henry rasped, his voice barely above a whisper, "at shelter. Eleanor said we needed companion." She was right. Always right. David listened with rapt attention as his uncle continued. "When Eleanor left us, Duke knew, sat by her chair for weeks. Then one day, looked at me, like he decided I needed him more. Been together 10 years now." Each word was an effort, but Henry was determined to tell his story, as if making up for years of silence. Duke had returned to his post at the entrance, but his demeanor had changed entirely. Where before there had been desperate vigilance, now there was patient waiting. He would rest, accept food from staff members, even allow visitors to approach and pet him. Jennifer Martinez noticed he would periodically look up at the third-floor windows, as if checking on his owner, then settle back down with what could only be described as contentment. Thomas Blackwood's scheduled discharge had come and gone, but he had requested to stay an additional day. His wife, Patricia, had initially been confused by this decision, but as she spent more time at the hospital, she began to understand. The couple sat together in the cafeteria, holding hands for the first time in months, watching through the large windows as Duke rested peacefully at the entrance. "I've been thinking," Thomas said quietly, "about what really matters. I've spent 20 years building a career, accumulating wealth, impressing people I don't even like. But that dog out there has shown me something I'd forgotten: loyalty, dedication, being present for the ones you love." Patricia squeezed his hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." The story of Duke and Henry had spread beyond the hospital walls. Local news stations had picked up on the tale, and reporters were gathering outside, hoping for interviews. Helen Crawford, the hospital administrator, found herself in the unexpected position of managing media attention while trying to maintain patient privacy and hospital operations. "We're witnessing something extraordinary," she told the press in a carefully prepared statement. "But we must also respect the privacy of our patients and maintain the dignity of this situation." Sarah Chen, the housekeeper who had first recognized Duke from previous visits, had become something of a hospital celebrity. She spent her breaks sitting near Duke, telling him about the other patients, about the happenings in the hospital, as if he were a trusted confidant. "You brought something special here," she would tell him, stroking his head. "You reminded us all why we do this work. It's not just about medicine. It's about love, about connection, about being there when someone needs you most." On the 8th day, Dr. Patterson made another unprecedented decision. "We're going to allow regular visits," he announced to the staff. "Twice daily, morning and evening, Duke can visit Mr. Morrison for 15 minutes. We'll monitor carefully, but the evidence is clear. This connection is crucial to Mr. Morrison's recovery." The twice-daily reunions became the highlight of the hospital's routine. Staff members would arrange their breaks to catch glimpses of Duke being led through the corridors. Patients in other rooms requested to be moved to positions where they could see the procession. The atmosphere in the hospital had shifted from clinical efficiency to something warmer, more human. Young Emma Thompson returned with her mother almost daily just to sit near Duke during his waiting periods. "He's teaching me about patience," Emma told her mother, "and about not giving up on the people you love." Her mother, Elizabeth Thompson, a single parent struggling to balance work and raising her daughter, found herself moved by the simple wisdom of this observation. Father O'Connor began incorporating Duke's story into his pastoral care. "Love," he would tell grieving families or anxious patients, "transcends the limitations of our understanding. It manifests in forms we don't expect, teaches lessons we didn't know we needed to learn." That faithful guardian outside isn't just waiting for his owner, he's reminding all of us what devotion truly means. The medical staff were documenting everything meticulously. Dr. Liu had begun writing a paper on the psychological and physiological impacts of emotional connection on recovery rates. "This could change how we approach patient care," she told Dr. Patterson during one of their evening rounds. "The implications for elderly patients, for those without family support, for anyone fighting for their life, the potential is enormous." Colonel Morrison had spent hours talking with his uncle, filling in the gaps of lost years, sharing stories of his own life, his career, his regrets about the distance that had grown between them. "I have a family," he told Henry one afternoon. "2 daughters, Jennifer and Sarah. They're teenagers now. They should know their great uncle. They should learn from you and Duke what real loyalty looks like." Henry's recovery, while remarkable, was still slow and uncertain. There were setbacks, moments when his breathing would become labored, when pain would cloud his features, when the struggle of his condition became evident. But during these difficult moments, the staff noticed something extraordinary. Duke, from his position at the entrance, would become agitated, pacing and whimpering, as if sensing his owner's distress, even from floors away and through walls of concrete and steel. Rebecca Foster, the social worker, had been coordinating with Colonel Morrison to plan for Henry's eventual discharge. "He can't go back to living alone," she said gently. "He'll need support, ongoing care, assistance with daily activities." David nodded firmly. "He's family. He'll come live with us. We have room, and my wife has already agreed. Duke too, of course. They're a package deal." The news of these arrangements seemed to energize Henry even more. The prospect of family, of not being alone, of Duke having a yard to run in and children to play with, gave him something to fight toward. "Your daughters," he whispered to David during one visit, "they'll love Duke. He's good with children, gentle, patient." Dr. Patterson observed all of this with a sense of professional satisfaction mixed with personal wonder. He had been a physician for 3 decades, had seen countless medical miracles, had participated in groundbreaking treatments and procedures, but nothing had affected him quite like watching this bond between man and dog facilitate healing that medicine alone could not achieve. Carlos Rodriguez, the night janitor, had started a tradition. Each night after his shift ended at midnight, he would spend a few minutes sitting near Duke, telling him about his own dog back home, a small terrier named Pancho. "You and Pancho would be friends," he would say to Duke. "You both know what it means to love someone completely, without conditions, without expectations of return." The 10th day brought another significant development. Henry was moved from the ICU to a regular room. This meant Duke could visit more frequently, stay longer, and the restrictions could be relaxed. The room they moved him to had a large window overlooking the main entrance, where Duke maintained his vigil. Even from the 3rd floor, separated by distance and glass, the two could see each other, maintain that visual connection that had become so crucial to both of them. Amanda Brooks, the nurse who had been present when Henry first arrived, found herself profoundly changed by the experience. She had been considering leaving nursing, burnt out by long hours and emotional exhaustion. But Duke's devotion, Henry's resilience, and the outpouring of compassion she had witnessed had rekindled her passion for caregiving. "I remembered why I became a nurse," she told her colleagues. "It's not just about administering medications or monitoring vital signs. It's about being present for people during their most vulnerable moments, about facilitating connections that heal." Maria Santos, the laboratory technician who had crossed herself at Duke's prescient arrival, had taken to leaving small treats for Duke, blessed by Father O'Connor. For protection and strength, she would say, placing them near his water bowl. Duke would sniff them carefully, then consume them with what seemed like gratitude. The media attention had intensified, with requests for interviews flooding the hospital's communications department. Helen Crawford, after consulting with Colonel Morrison and the medical team, agreed to allow one carefully controlled press conference. "The story belongs to Duke and Mr. Morrison," she said, "but perhaps sharing it will bring hope to others." The press conference was scheduled for the 12th day, allowing time for Henry to gain enough strength to participate, if he chose to. Dr. Patterson worked with a PR firm to prepare talking points that would respect patient privacy while honoring the extraordinary nature of what had transpired. "This isn't just a feel-good story," Patterson insisted. "This is about the future of holistic healthcare, about understanding that healing involves more than just treating symptoms." Detective Robert Hayes, who had initially taken interest in the case out of professional curiosity, had become one of Duke's regular visitors. He would stop by during his patrol breaks, sitting near the German Shepherd, finding a peace in the dog's presence that his stressful job rarely afforded. "In my line of work," he told Duke one evening, "I see a lot of the worst in humanity. But you, boy, you remind me of the best. You remind me why we fight to protect the good things in this world." As the 12th day dawned, anticipation filled St. Mary's Medical Center. Henry Morrison had been practicing sitting up, working with physical therapists to regain his strength. The plan was for him to appear briefly at the press conference, with Duke by his side, to thank the staff and share their story with the world. But as preparations were underway, an unexpected complication arose that would test everything they had learned about the power of connection and the depths of devotion. The morning of the press conference began with unexpected chaos. At 6:15 a.m., Henry Morrison experienced a severe setback. His blood pressure dropped dramatically, his breathing became labored, and the medical team rushed to stabilize him. Dr. Patterson, arriving early to prepare for the media event, found himself instead coordinating emergency interventions to save his patient's life. "Cancel the press conference," he ordered tersely, his hands working quickly to adjust medications and monitor equipment. "And someone needs to keep Duke calm. If he senses this, if he reacts..." Dr. Liu understood immediately. The bond between Henry and Duke had proven to be a double-edged sword. While it facilitated healing, it also meant that Duke was acutely attuned to his owner's condition. But Duke already knew. At the exact moment Henry's crisis began, the German shepherd at the entrance became frantically agitated. Jennifer Martinez, who had arrived early for her shift, witnessed the transformation. Duke's peaceful waiting erupted into desperate pacing, whimpering, and attempts to push through the glass doors. His distress was so evident, so visceral, that it immediately drew the attention of everyone in the lobby. "Something's wrong with Mr. Morrison," Jennifer said with certainty, rushing to the phone. When she called up to the ICU, her fears were confirmed. "Duke knew," she told the gathering crowd of early morning staff. He knew the exact moment something went wrong. Colonel David Morrison, staying in a nearby hotel, received the emergency call and rushed to the hospital. He found Duke in a state of near panic, trying desperately to reach his owner. "It's okay, boy," David said, though his own voice trembled with fear. "They're helping him. The doctors are helping Uncle Henry." The crisis lasted for 3 agonizing hours. Dr. Patterson and his team worked tirelessly, employing every medical intervention at their disposal. Henry's aged body was fighting back against the infection that had sent him to the hospital originally, complicated now by the stress of his rapid recovery attempts. It was as if his body had pushed too hard, too fast, trying to heal for Duke's sake. During those critical hours, Duke refused to be consoled. Rebecca Foster tried, Father O'Connor tried, even young Emma Thompson, who had arrived with her mother, attempted to calm the distraught dog. Nothing worked. Duke's anguish was palpable, his howls echoing through the hospital corridors in a sound that tore at everyone's hearts. "Maybe we should take him up," Jennifer suggested desperately to Dr. Patterson when he emerged briefly to update Colonel Morrison. "Maybe seeing Duke will help again, like before." Patterson shook his head grimly. "It's too risky. Mr. Morrison is barely conscious, fighting for every breath. The stimulation could be too much." But Duke made the decision for them. With a burst of strength that surprised everyone, he pulled free from his leash and bolted through the lobby. Security guards tried to stop him, but the desperate German shepherd was unstoppable. He knew exactly where to go, racing up the emergency stairs with a speed that defied his days of vigilant waiting. "Let him go," Dr. Patterson shouted to security. "Clear the halls, but let him reach Morrison." The decision was instantaneous, instinctive, born from witnessing the power of their connection. If there was any chance Duke could reach his owner, could pull him back from the brink, they had to take it. Duke burst into Henry's room with the medical team scrambling to prepare for his arrival. The German shepherd went straight to his owner's bedside, placing his head on the bed next to Henry's face, releasing a sound that was part whimper, part howl, part desperate plea. "Fight!" the sound seemed to say. "Come back to me. Don't leave me alone." For a moment, nothing changed. The monitors continued their alarming readings. Henry's breathing remained shallow and labored. Then, incredibly, Henry's hand moved. It was the smallest gesture, fingers twitching toward Duke's familiar presence. The dog immediately pressed closer, his warmth, his scent, his undeniable presence flooding Henry's fading consciousness with reasons to fight. "Talk to him," Dr. Patterson urged Colonel Morrison, who had followed Duke up the stairs. "Tell him to fight, to stay with us, to stay with Duke." David moved to his uncle's other side, taking his frail hand. "Uncle Henry, you can't leave yet. We have plans. The girls want to meet you. Duke needs you. We all need you." The room fell silent except for the beeping of monitors and Duke's soft, continuous whimpering. Then miraculously, Henry's vital signs began to stabilize. His breathing deepened slightly, his heart rate strengthened, his blood pressure inched upward. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't sudden, but it was real, measurable progress that the medical equipment couldn't deny. Dr. Liu, monitoring every change, felt tears streaming down her face. "The power of love," she whispered. "It's literally keeping him alive." Duke never moved from his position, his presence a lifeline anchoring Henry to this world. giving him something worth fighting for. Over the next hours, with Duke maintaining his vigil at the bedside, Henry's condition gradually improved. The medical team adjusted treatments, but everyone in that room knew that the real medicine was the bond between man and dog. Dr. Patterson made an executive decision. Duke would stay. Hospital regulations could adapt. This was bigger than protocols and policies. News of the dramatic morning spread through the hospital like wildfire. Staff members on break gathered outside Henry's room, witnessing through the windows the power of devotion made manifest. Thomas Blackwood, finally discharged, but refusing to leave until he knew Henry's fate, stood with Patricia, both of them crying openly at the scene before them. "This is what I've been missing," Thomas told his wife, his arm around her shoulders. "This kind of love, this kind of commitment. That dog would die for his owner, would do anything to keep him safe. When was the last time I showed you that kind of devotion?" Patricia leaned into her husband. "You're showing me now. Being here, being present, learning from this. That's what matters." By late afternoon, Henry was stable enough to have the breathing tube removed. His first conscious words, barely audible, were addressed to Duke. "Good boy, my good boy." Duke's tail wagged for the first time in hours, his relief evident in every movement. The press conference had to be rescheduled, but the media presence outside the hospital had intensified. The story of Duke's desperate race through the hospital, of his life-saving presence at his owner's bedside, had captured national attention. But inside St. Mary's Medical Center, the focus remained on healing, on the quiet miracle unfolding in room 312. Father O'Connor spent the evening in prayer, not his usual formal prayers, but simple words of gratitude for being witness to such profound love. "This is what we're meant for," he reflected aloud to Dr. Monroe, who had been providing psychological support to the staff through the crisis. "To love so completely, so selflessly, that our very presence can heal. Duke is teaching us what it means to be truly devoted." As night fell, Duke was finally settled on a special blanket beside Henry's bed, close enough to touch to provide comfort, but positioned so the medical staff could still access their patient. Henry's hand rested on Duke's head, that simple contact maintaining the connection that had proven stronger than illness. Stronger than medical science, stronger than death itself. Jennifer Martinez, who had been documenting everything, sat down to update her journal. "Today I witnessed a miracle," she wrote. "Not in the medical sense, though Mr. Morrison's recovery defies explanation. The miracle was seeing love triumph over everything else. Duke didn't save Mr. Morrison with medical intervention or scientific knowledge. He saved him by simply refusing to let go, by being present, by loving without condition or reservation." Colonel Morrison spent the night in a chair beside his uncle's bed, watching Duke and Henry sleep peacefully, their breathing synchronized, their connection visible even in rest. He thought about his own daughters, about the lessons he wanted to teach them, about the example Duke had set. "I'm going to be better," he promised himself, "for my family, for my uncle, for everyone who has shown me what real devotion looks like." The following morning brought new developments. Henry, though still weak, was conscious and communicative. The infection that had ravaged his system was finally responding to treatment, aided by his renewed will to live. Dr. Patterson, exhausted but exhilarated, gathered the medical team to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. "We need to study this," he said, "not just for academic purposes, but to revolutionize how we approach patient care. The emotional and psychological components of healing are not just supportive. They can be primary factors in recovery. Duke has shown us that medicine without compassion, without connection, is incomplete." The hospital administration, initially concerned about liability and protocol violations, now found themselves at the center of a medical revolution. Helen Crawford received calls from hospitals across the country, medical journals requesting papers, researchers wanting to study the case. "We've stumbled onto something extraordinary," she told Dr. Patterson, "but we need to ensure we honor what Duke and Mr. Morrison have taught us. This isn't about publicity or prestige. It's about changing how we care for patients. Sarah Chen, the housekeeper who had recognized Duke from previous visits, was interviewed by hospital staff about her observations. Mr. Morrison always treated Duke like family, she recalled. Talked to him like a person, made sure he was comfortable during appointments, never once treated him like just a dog. That respect, that love, it goes both ways. Duke knows he's valued, knows he matters. That's why he fought so hard to stay by his side. The rescheduled press conference was set for 3 days later, giving Henry more time to recover. But the media coverage had already begun. With stories of Duke's vigil, his desperate run through the hospital, his life-saving presence at Henry's bedside becoming national news. Letters poured in from around the world. People sharing their own stories of animal devotion, of pets who had sensed illness, who had provided comfort during difficult times. Dr. Monroe began developing a program based on Duke's example. Animal-assisted therapy isn't new, she explained to the hospital board, but what we're proposing is different. This is about recognizing the healing power of bonds, of allowing those connections to be part of the treatment plan, not just an adjunct to it. As preparations continued for the press conference, Henry worked with physical therapists, determined to regain enough strength to stand beside Duke and share their story with the world. Each therapy session was conducted with Duke lying nearby, his presence providing motivation and comfort. The day of the press conference arrived with unexpected sunshine breaking through Seattle's typical gray clouds. St. Mary's Medical Center had transformed its main conference room into a space that would accommodate the dozens of media outlets requesting access to Duke and Henry's story. But more importantly, it had become a gathering place for everyone whose lives had been touched by this extraordinary tale of devotion. Henry Morrison, though still weak, sat in a wheelchair with Duke lying faithfully at his side, one hand resting on the German shepherd's head. Colonel David Morrison stood behind his uncle, his military bearing softened by the emotional journey of the past 2 weeks. The room was filled to capacity. Medical staff, patients whose recovery had been inspired by Duke's vigil, families who had found hope in their story, and community members who had followed the unfolding events. Dr. James Patterson stepped to the podium first, his voice carrying the weight of professional authority mixed with personal amazement. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. What we have witnessed over the past 14 days has challenged our understanding of medicine, of healing, and of the bonds that connect us all. Mr. Henry Morrison arrived at our facility in critical condition and by all conventional medical assessments. His prognosis was uncertain at best. He paused, looking at Duke and Henry with visible emotion. But Duke, this remarkable German shepherd, knew something we didn't. He arrived at our hospital before his owner, maintained a vigil that defied explanation, and when given the opportunity to reconnect with Mr. Morrison, literally pulled him back from the brink. This isn't just about a loyal pet waiting for his owner. This is about the power of love to heal, the strength of bonds to overcome physical limitations, and the lesson that sometimes the best medicine isn't found in a prescription bottle. Dr. Catherine Liu spoke next, her scientific perspective forever altered by what she had witnessed. I've been a physician for 20 years, trained in the most rigorous medical programs, committed to evidence-based medicine. Duke and Mr. Morrison have shown me that there's another kind of evidence, another kind of medicine. The measurable improvements in Mr. Morrison's vital signs when Duke was present, the documented correlation between their proximity and his recovery. This is data we cannot ignore. Then it was Henry's turn. Colonel Morrison helped position the microphone, and the room fell silent as the elderly man prepared to speak. His voice, though weak, carried a strength that commanded attention. My name is Henry Morrison. I'm 92 years old. I've lived through a world war, lost the love of my life, and faced more challenges than I can count. But nothing has shown me the true meaning of devotion like this dog. Right here, He paused to catch his breath, his hand never leaving Duke's head. Duke found me when I needed him most. After my Eleanor passed, I thought my purpose was gone. But Duke, he gave me a reason to wake up each morning, a reason to keep going. When I got sick, somehow he knew. Somehow he understood that I needed him to fight for me, because I couldn't fight for myself. Tears flowed freely in the audience. Jennifer Martinez, standing near the back with Dorothy Williams, squeezed the older nurse's hand tightly. Thomas Blackwood sat with Patricia, their fingers intertwined, both of them forever changed by witnessing this testament to true devotion. Henry continued, his voice growing stronger with emotion. They tell me Duke waited outside this hospital for days, that he knew I was here before the ambulance even brought me in. I can't explain that. I can't explain how he knew, but I can tell you this. The bond between a person and their companion, whether it's a dog, a cat, or any creature that shares our lives, that bond is sacred. It's powerful. It's real. Colonel Morrison leaned down, helping his uncle with a sip of water. The gesture was tender, familial, a connection that had been renewed through this experience. David then took the microphone himself. I'm Colonel David Morrison, Henry's nephew. I hadn't seen my uncle in years. Life got busy, I made excuses, I let time slip away. But Duke's devotion, his refusal to give up, taught me something crucial. Family matters. Being present matters. That simple lesson from a German Shepherd has reunited our family in ways I never expected. He looked at his uncle with visible affection. My daughters, Jennifer and Sarah, flew in yesterday to meet their great-uncle for the first time. They've spent hours listening to his stories, sitting with Duke, learning what real loyalty looks like. That's a gift I can never repay. Duke didn't just save my uncle's life, he saved our family. Rebecca Foster, the social worker who had orchestrated so much behind the scenes, spoke about the broader implications. What Duke and Mr. Morrison have demonstrated goes beyond one man and his dog. This is about recognizing the therapeutic value of animal companions, about understanding that healing happens on multiple levels, physical, emotional, and spiritual. We're already implementing changes at St. Mary's to allow more flexibility for animal visitation, to recognize these bonds as part of the healing process. Father O'Connor offered a spiritual perspective that resonated with many in the room. In my years of ministry, I've witnessed countless examples of love, sacrifice, and devotion. But Duke has reminded us of something essential, that love transcends species, transcends our limited understanding, and manifests in ways that can only be described as miraculous. This story isn't just about a dog and his owner. It's about the power of unconditional love to transform, to heal, to save. The questions from the press were thoughtful, emotional, and far-reaching. One reporter asked what Henry planned to do next. With a smile that brightened his weathered face, Henry responded, I'm going to live with my nephew David and his family. Duke and I both are. We're going to have a yard to play in, grandnieces who want to throw tennis balls, and family dinners around a table full of people who love us. That's all I ever wanted, to matter to someone, to have a place to belong. Duke, as if understanding the significance of the moment, lifted his head and released a soft, gentle bark that seemed to affirm everything that had been said. The room erupted in applause, tears flowing freely as people witnessed the culmination of this extraordinary journey. Dr. Patterson concluded the formal remarks with a vision for the future. Duke has changed St. Mary's Medical Center forever. We're establishing the Morrison Duke Center for Integrative Healing, a program dedicated to studying and implementing the therapeutic benefits of animal-human bonds in medical treatment. This isn't just about allowing therapy dogs to visit. This is about revolutionizing how we understand healing itself. As the press conference concluded, something unexpected happened. Young Emma Thompson, accompanied by her mother Elizabeth, approached Henry and Duke with a wrapped package. Mr. Morrison, Emma said shyly, I made something for you and Duke. Inside was a beautiful hand-stitched blanket decorated with images of a German shepherd and an elderly man, surrounded by hearts and stars. Emma worked on this every day, Elizabeth explained, her eyes glistening. Duke taught her about loyalty and love. She wanted to give something back. Henry's hands trembled as he accepted the gift, while Duke sniffed it carefully before pressing his head against Emma's hand in gratitude. The moment captured perfectly what Duke's vigil had accomplished. Not just saving one life, but touching countless others, teaching lessons about devotion that would ripple outward for years to come. In the weeks that followed, Henry's recovery continued steadily. The move to Colonel Morrison's home in the Seattle suburbs was celebrated by hospital staff who had become like family. Duke adjusted quickly to his new environment, reveling in the spacious yard, the attention from David's daughters, but always staying close to Henry. Thomas Blackwood and Patricia renewed their marriage vows in a small ceremony at St. Mary's, with Father O'Connor officiating and Duke serving as an honorary witness. Duke reminded us what really matters, Thomas told the gathered friends and family. We almost lost sight of that, but watching his dedication, his unwavering love, showed us the way back. Jennifer Martinez was promoted to head of the new Patient Relations and Animal Therapy Department. Her journal documenting Duke's vigil became the foundation for training materials used across the country. Duke was my teacher, she often said. He showed me that healing isn't just about medical procedures. It's about love, connection, and being present. Dr. Patterson and Dr. Liu published their findings in multiple medical journals, sparking a revolution in how hospitals approached patient care. The data was undeniable. Patients with strong emotional connections, especially those involving animal companions, showed significantly improved recovery rates. Duke had inadvertently launched a medical revolution. Sarah Chen, the housekeeper who first recognized Duke, was asked to lead sensitivity training for hospital staff about recognizing and respecting the bonds between patients and their animal companions. Mr. Morrison and Duke taught me to see every patient as a whole person, she explained, not just a medical case, but someone with relationships, with love, with reasons to fight. The Morrison Duke Center for Integrative Healing opened 6 months after the initial vigil, funded by donations that poured in from around the world. The center featured therapy rooms designed to accommodate animal visitors, gardens where patients could walk with their companions, and research facilities dedicated to studying the healing power of human-animal bonds. On the center's opening day, Henry Morrison, now recovered and vibrant at 93, stood beside Duke to cut the ribbon. "This isn't about me," he said to the assembled crowd. "This is about every person who loves their companion, every animal who waits faithfully, every bond that makes life worth living." Duke didn't just save my life. He showed us all how to live. Duke, now officially recognized as an honorary member of the St. Mary's Medical Center staff, wore a special vest with his name embroidered alongside the title Chief Inspiration Officer. He visited the hospital weekly, bringing comfort to patients, reminding staff of their purpose, and serving as a living testament to the power of unconditional love. Carlos Rodriguez, the night janitor who had sat with Duke during those long, lonely vigils, was moved to tears at the opening ceremony. "I always knew there was something special about that dog," he said. "He reminded me why we do what we do, why we show up every day. It's not just a job. It's about being there for people when they need us most." As the sun set on that opening day, casting golden light across the new center's gardens, Henry sat on a bench with Duke at his feet. His great-nieces, Jennifer and Sarah Morrison, sat beside him, listening to his stories about the war, about Eleanor, about the incredible journey he and Duke had shared. Colonel David stood nearby with his wife Maria, watching his reunited family with a gratitude that words couldn't express. The story of Duke's vigil had become legendary, but more importantly, it had become a catalyst for change. Hospitals across the country implemented new policies recognizing the therapeutic value of animal companions. Research into the healing power of human-animal bonds received unprecedented funding and attention. But perhaps most significantly, countless individuals were inspired to examine their own relationships, their own capacity for devotion, their own understanding of what it means to truly love. Dr. Monroe, the psychiatrist who had been so instrumental in understanding Duke's impact, often reflected on the profound lessons learned. Duke didn't just teach us about animal intelligence or the power of bonds, she would say in lectures and conferences. He taught us about the essence of being human, the capacity to love without reservation, to commit without conditions, to be present without distraction. As months turned to years, the impact of those 14 days continued to resonate. Duke and Henry became symbols of hope, their stories shared in schools, churches, medical conferences, and community gatherings. Children learned about loyalty through their example. Medical students studied the case as part of their training in holistic care. Families reflected on their own bonds and commitments. On the 5th anniversary of Duke's vigil, St. Mary's Medical Center held a celebration that brought together everyone whose lives had been touched by their story. The hospital lobby featured a bronze statue of Duke in his sentinel position, gazing toward the entrance with that same unwavering devotion he had shown during those critical days. The inscription read, "In honor of Duke, whose love knew no limits, and Henry Morrison, who was worthy of such devotion. May their story remind us that the greatest healing comes from the heart." Henry, now 97 and still going strong, stood beside the statue with Duke, now 12, and showing some gray around his muzzle, but still alert and devoted. Together, they greeted visitors, accepted honors, and shared their ongoing journey. "People ask me what the secret is," Henry told the gathered crowd, "how Duke and I have stayed so connected, so healthy, so happy. The answer is simple: we need each other. We choose each other every single day. That's what love is, not just feeling it, but choosing it actively, constantly." Duke's legacy lived on in countless ways. The therapy dog program he inspired had helped thousands of patients. The research funded in his name had revolutionized understanding of healing. The families reunited, the marriages saved, the lives touched. All bore witness to the power of one dog's unwavering love. As the sun set on that anniversary celebration, Duke and Henry walked slowly through the hospital gardens together, surrounded by the family they had helped reunite and the community they had helped heal. It was a perfect full-circle moment, from the desperate vigil of a faithful guardian to the celebration of love's triumph over every obstacle. The story of Duke and Henry Morrison would be told for generations, not just as a tale of a loyal dog, but as a testament to the transformative power of devotion, the healing strength of connection, and the profound truth that love, in its purest form, can overcome anything. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Duke and Henry has moved your hearts as deeply as it moved everyone at St. Mary's Medical Center. Their journey reminds us that the bonds we share with those we love, whether human or animal, possess a healing power that transcends medicine and logic. If this story of unwavering devotion, family reunion, and the triumph of love has touched you, we invite you to explore our special playlist of equally captivating stories about the extraordinary connections that define our lives. You'll find it right here, just a click to your left. If Duke and Henry's story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and leave us a thumbs up. We bring you unique stories every day that explore the depths of human emotion, the power of relationships, and the unexpected ways love manifests in our lives. Join us in the comments below and share your own stories of loyalty, devotion, and the companions who have changed your life. Your story might inspire others, just as Duke and Henry's story has inspired thousands. Thank you for being part of this journey, and we look forward to sharing more heartwarming tales with you soon.